Looking for Sato. I can't help you.
How do I get to him?
Let the police handle it.
Michael Douglas is a New York cop trying to find an escaped prisoner in Japan in Black Rain. It's one of 5 new movies we'll be reviewing this week on Siskel and Ebert. I'm Roger Ebert of the Chicago Sun-Times.
And I'm Gene Siskel of the Chicago Tribune. Our first film is the highly touted Black Rain by Ridley Scott, the maker of Alien and Blade Runner. Like those pictures, Black Rain is good looking, but there's not much else to recommend it. Michael Douglas plays a tough New York City detective. How tough? He drag races a punk on a motorcycle as the movie begins. The rest of the film is about a sophisticated. The next thing that happens is that Douglas and his partner witness a Japanese mobster threaten a rival doing business with an American mafioso. That's Andy Garcia as Douglas's partner. They wind up tracking that killer, named Sato, in his native Japan, and they're forced to work with a Japanese detective partner whom Douglas doesn't respect at first.
You're a foreigner. This isn't New York. We have rules here.
You have rules here, huh? Hey, look, pal, I've seen Sato's work, okay? He ain't following your program.
Black Rain pays only lip service to the Japanese culture in the most obvious stereotypical ways, as Douglas, on the case, gets a lesson in how to use chopsticks.
Doma arigato.
Big shot from New York, huh?
The last act of the film is the predictable extended chase in colorful Japanese urban settings. Black Rain has a good villain, but I think the script makes a fundamental mistake. The Michael Douglas character is presented as very much in control most of the time he's in Japan, and I think the whole picture would have been so much better if he had been totally at sea, constantly being fooled along with us in the audience. Why should he understand how? He's a run-of-the-mill New York detective. He's not the big all-star, okay? Why would he know how detective work is done in Japan? How would he know how Japanese criminals work, especially on their own turf? It doesn't make any sense. Instead, he is played as the traditional macho hero, and that kind of cultural imperialism, I think, really undoes the movie.
I was also very disappointed in this movie. One of the things I kept thinking of as I looked at it was Blade Runner, the earlier movie by Ridley Scott, which used enormously effective settings in urban Los Angeles of the future, making that into a very depressing, kind of overwhelming city, kind of the Gotham City of Los Angeles, if you will. They're doing the same thing here, but to no purpose. And what happens is the city, Osaka, the sets for the city, overwhelm the action. There was so much visually going on that has nothing to do with the story that you're almost distracted. And then in the middle of it, this really dumb, simple story. I mean, it's not a very good plot. And you didn't mention Kate Capshaw, who was the bartender in the mob hangout.
Because she's an important...
Now, this could have been a cliche of one sort, where they have the geisha who falls in love with the American cop and gives him all the secrets. Instead, it's an American girl who's been there 8 years and presumably knows every single secret of the Japanese mafia, which she doles out to Michael Douglas one at a time. I somehow doubt if an American girl could find out everything about the Japanese yakuza, as they call themselves, even in 8 years, even as a bartender.
Well, if she knew it all, why would she give it to him?
Yeah,
that's the point.
That's a good point.
The whole thing is, this movie is made like an American film, and they just... I think it's almost insulting. The portrayal of the Japanese in the film, which could have been exciting and fresh to us, is just standard stuff updated from stereotypes of the 40s.
Terrifically good-looking productions to cover up a very, 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 very thin script. Okay, next movie. And our next movie is called Heavy Petting. This is quite a change of subject, among other things. It's a compilation of old and new footage on the subject of teenage sex, especially in the 1950s and early 1960s, when, according to the testimony in this movie, teenagers knew a lot about sex and almost everything they knew was wrong. The movie brings together several different kinds of material. First, there are old educational films in which lecturers solemnly discuss the ins and outs of human sexuality.
Well, I may be old-fashioned, but I've always been taught that sex relations should be saved for marriage. If I did give in to Keith, I don't think he'd ever respect me again.
Then there are the interviews with a lot of survivors of teenage sex, people now in their 30s and 40s who remember the old days. A lot of these witnesses are performers like actress Ann Magnuson, who talks about how people never talked about sex.
Every time she said penis, we'd break up into squeals of laughter. And she got really mad at us because we would never pay attention. We were like, yeah, okay, let's go watch Bullwinkle, you know.
The movie includes historical documentary gems like this rediscovered footage of the dramatic search for a VD carrier.
Starting with a known hangout, the ballpark. With only a vague description of a girl, the field representative tries to find one of the known contacts of an infected person. And here, as with all other cases in Oakdale, he is successful in locating a potential source of syphilis. The tall, aggressive blonde.
A sequence like that contains an amazement all its own as the camera zooms in on that suspicious-looking blonde. But heavy petting has a couple of problems, I think. One is that the structure of the movie quickly gets really routine. First we get old footage, then we get new footage, then we get a clip from a Hollywood teenager movie, then the process begins all over again with some more witnesses telling about their adolescence. The second problem in this movie is that none of the so-called experts in the film really seem to have fought it out in the trenches of teenage sexuality. A lot of them seem to have grown up in big cities, for example, where they miss the whole car culture. This movie really totally misses the boat on the whole culture of parking and lovers' lanes and things. I kept having the feeling that any randomly selected group of my friends would have more interesting memories about adolescence than the people in this film. They were losers in the teenage romantic sweepstakes, but then again, who wasn't? The problem is they can't even make good stories out of their defeats.
I thought this was a very weak film, given the potential for being funny or insightful. And why not be insightful? The easiest thing to do is to look at old VD films or Army training films about that and just run that material. So I don't give them any credit for that. It's not a fresh insight to look at that stuff as campy. But then they have interviews with people, and they pick a lot of fringe show business people, sort of cult figures who are sort of standard order whenever you want to be sort of a little bit avant-garde, but now they're really not. They're mainstream because they're used so often in the same way. I thought it was completely uninspired. I think they blew it. I wasn't laughing at the stuff. And actually, I would have probably preferred to have seen one uninterrupted Army training film or something like that, rather than what they put together through editing.
You know, one of the things I couldn't help thinking about as I watched this movie is that several people talk about that legendary girl in the senior class. You know, there's every time that anybody talks about teenage sex in the 50s, they always say, and 3 or 4 people in this movie say, I think everyone in our senior class was a virgin when we graduated. We never had any sex except for this one girl who was said to, you know, go all the way. I would like it if they would find that girl.
Exactly.
You know, I would really like to find the legendary girl from the 50s who went all the way. I don't know if she exists. I mean, there was supposed to be one in our senior class, but the identity kept changing, and by the time our 10th anniversary came around, we figured that that was just a bad rumor.
What you're talking about is something of substance.
Yes.
I mean, we're dealing obviously with an important subject. Let's get some confessions, not people doing a showbiz act or standard camp material. Coming up next, Bruce Willis and Emily Lloyd star in Country as a teenage girl tries to learn from her uncle about the Vietnam War.
Well, I want to know about it. I got the right.
Our next film is yet another Vietnam War drama, but it is rendered special because of the intimacy of its story and because of one extraordinary performance. In Country is the name of the film. It's a story of a 17-year-old Southern girl whose father was killed in Vietnam combat before she was born. Now she wants to learn about him and the war. Her uncle, her mother's brother, is a Vietnam vet played by Bruce Willis. He's closed-mouthed and bitter about the war and doesn't want to answer his niece's persistent questions.
What's a click and what's a bouncing booby?
Bouncing Betty.
Well, what is it?
Cake recipe. You ain't never gonna understand it. You don't want to.
That's Emily Lloyd, a British actress so convincing as the Southern girl. When she reads her father's diary, she starts forming opinions about him that infuriate Bruce Willis.
The way he talked about them gooks and that killing, I hated it. I don't like him anymore.
You don't like him anymore? Who the hell are you to judge him?
The film concludes with a quietly powerful family visit to the Vietnam War Memorial in Washington, D.C.
Plain E. Hughes.
That visit to the memorial runs on for about 15 screen minutes, and it has almost an hallucinogenic quality, taking us into a trance-like reverie about the war and its effects on families. It's remarkable, that monument, and particularly the way it's shot by Norman Jewison, in which you see the reflection of the people looking at the wall on the names and the reverberation back and forth. It's very, very special. What I like about In Country is not that it has any fresh insights, but that it is so matter-of-fact about the slices of life it presents. We meet some people, we see how the war has touched them, and life goes on. Emily Lloyd is superb. Bruce Willis is thoroughly credible in a serious role, and that marvelous Vietnam War memorial deserves some kind of award as supporting actor in this picture.
You know, I felt almost exactly the same way you did about the movie. This movie doesn't have a plot in a conventional sense.
Right.
It doesn't set up a lot of conflict between the people and who's going to win and who's going to lose.
Will the Vietnam vet blow up and kill everybody,
yes,
or what?
Really go berserk with his machine gun or something? None of that. This is a movie about ordinary people in an ordinary small town going about their ordinary lives and asking questions that anyone would ask. This daughter has never known her father, and the most heartbreaking line in the movie is when her mother says, "Honey, I only married him a month before he went to Vietnam, and then I never saw him again. I hardly even remember your dad." But she remembers him, and with her uncle, they go back and they make their peace at the memorial with this war. And the last scene of the movie is constructed like a short story. Episode and dialogue leading up to a big moment of truth at the end, rather than a more conventional plot. Well, it's very effective.
I thought it was extremely effective. This Emily Lloyd, first of all, I didn't recognize her at first. This is the girl from Wish You Were Here.
Yes.
And then
she played a mafia daughter
just a couple of weeks ago. And you see her, and boy, what a fresh, exciting person. Then you realize who it is. I mean, it's a tremendous achievement. It's a great bit of casting, I think, to think of her for this role. Bruce Willis was just fine.
And the end of the movie is a real emotional powerhouse.
Absolutely.
It really is. Coming up next, The Dry White Season with Donald Sutherland and Marlon Brando. First time on the screen in 9 years, in the story of a white South African who rebels against the system.
Justice in South Africa is misapplied when it comes to the question of race.
Our next movie is named A Dry White Season, and it tells the story of a white South African, an Afrikaner, who was a sports hero and now is a schoolmaster and is pretty good at turning a blind eye to the injustices in his society. He's comfortable, his family is happy, and so why should he rock the boat? But then one day the son of the black gardener that works for him disappears, and then the gardener also disappears while searching for his son. It appears that both of them have died in prison, and so finally the white man gets involved.
Will you take me to the funeral? Are you crazy? That's no place for you, man.
That's Donald Sutherland as the white South African and Zakes Mokai as a black activist in the struggle against apartheid. As Sutherland continues to get more deeply involved in the case, he alienates his family, especially his wife, played by Janet Sussman.
A drunken Kaffir and an Afrikaner traitor. You deserve each other.
Sutherland goes to a well-known white lawyer for advice, a legendary barrister played by Marlon Brando. This is Brando's first film appearance since 1980, and his character takes a wicked delight in playing with the government witnesses.
Would you have this court believe that this man tried to throw himself through the window forwards, and being frustrated in that effort, he turned himself round and with great force threw himself backwards towards the window? Evidently. But would you care to demonstrate that for this court?
A Dry White Season tells a simple story of how a man finds that he can no longer close his eyes to the injustices of the society he lives in, but it contains a lot of information about South Africa, too, about the lifestyles of the whites and blacks, and the strange way in which the ruling segment is able to live in isolated comfort and never really confront the daily realities of the non-whites in their midst. There have been two other major films recently about South Africa, Cry Freedom and A World Apart, but this one does a better job of showing the whole spectrum of South Africa and not just a few white dissenters. It's a powerful and important film, and I thought Donald Sutherland was just right in his performance as an ordinary man who stubbornly demands answers for his questions.
Well, I think that the material is familiar to a lot of us. We know the subject fairly well. I thought what was special about it is that the director really confronted us with the brutality. Didn't shy away from it, pushes the edge of it, shows us children being harmed and badly beaten up, shows us adults and their bodies decomposing and cut up. And I thought that that kind of confrontation was very smart. that it shouldn't be movie injuries happening to people, but let it look bloody, let people see what's happening and who's dying, and I thought that was what made the film a little more urgent than just a traditional
This movie was directed by a 32-year-old woman from Martinique named Usan Palsy, who made a movie a few years ago called Sugarcane Alley in Martinique that we both thought was one of the really best movies we'd seen in that year, as I recall. What she does in both movies is she is able to involve us in the daily lives of the characters. She sees these people. She doesn't just see a story in which she's manipulating them for some effect. She sees how they feel, how they live, how they talk, and more than in most movies, she sees, that I've seen from South Africa, she sees how the black people live and how their daily lives are constructed, instead of just as in Cry Freedom, showing them in the maid in the kitchen or the person down at the end of the street. She puts them right up there on the screen.
Yeah, there is a documentary-like approach to her pictures, and I think it serves this subject very, very well. Coming up next, Heart of Dixie, the story of 3 sorority sisters coming of age during the 1950s.
I've just got this mad thing for Mr. Elvis Aaron Presley.
Our next film is the predictable college reminiscence called Heart of Dixie, about a couple of traditional Southern belles in Alabama in 1957 trying to decide what to do with their lives after graduation. Just like in the movie called Shag a couple of months ago, one of the girls is considering marrying the richest guy in school, but of course that won't happen. Heart of Dixie also follows the classic formula of the good girl brunette and the bad girl, the loose girl, blonde. Here we meet the girls in a bar.
I want to dance now, and I want to do it slow.
Hey, honey, I tell you what, why don't we wait for the next basketball and not dance your pretty little behind Come on, guys! Come on, gentlemen!
The blonde is played by Virginia Madsen in an all-too-familiar scene. The only fresh wrinkle in the story, Ally Sheedy's character confronts resistance when she tries to speak out against racial injustice. Even her sorority house maid asks her not to interfere.
Honey, I praise him and him. Point the way. Take care of all of them that been vanished to death.
Keefe, I still can't believe that's enough.
'Cause you still believe in Santa Claus, baby.
I could see how this story might be informative to a teenage girl wondering about the pressures of college life and what it's going to be like, but I can't see anyone who's ever seen a movie not grow tired of the cliches in Heart of Dixie.
We saw 2 entirely different movies.
Okay.
This movie wasn't about the cliches of college life in 1957. This was a movie very much like the last one, the movie in South Africa. This is about a person living in a white society with all of its perks and all of its prerequisites and all of its protection, who is confronted by racial injustice and who decides to speak out, and who at the end of the movie does so, calling herself a sister of a black woman who was the first student to register at this college, and therefore earning the ostracism of all of the other whites, all of her friends. She steps out of her society in order to do what she feels is the right thing. And that's what the movie is about, Gene. It's not about predictable Southern girls in 1957.
Well, I mean, it certainly is about what you said it's about.
It's about her society and how she leaves it.
Roger, do you seriously think that I don't know that that's what the story
Well, your review didn't really seem to understand that it's about this moment,
one thing.
this turning point.
This one thing. It's 1957, and she's registering the first student, as you said, and she's going to have a romance with the photographer, the press service photographer, in the sense that he's going to inspire her to be more authentic and all that. Well, I mean, that's sort of standard material. She doesn't even have a romance with him. They say goodbye at the end of the movie. Well, there's an implied.
I mean, I
don't
want to pull rank on you that I'm 3 years older than you are, but I was alive at this time, and I remember the fraternity sorority system, the racism, the fact that there weren't black students around, that you didn't talk to blacks, that they were someplace else, and then suddenly this tremendously dramatic moment when this young black woman registered in a Southern university and everything changed, and this is about one student who sees that that's right and it isn't wrong, and she is able to turn her back on her sorority, to turn her back on all the values, including this stupid fiancé that she has, and move forward into the 1960s and into a new world.
And then that's all well and good.
Yes.
It's noble and wonderful, and there isn't a person that's going to disagree with you, and you surely don't think, I mean, the only thing that you're pulling rank on is presuming that I'm not intelligent enough to pick that up. I'm telling you...
But you didn't...
Wait a second. I'm telling you very specifically that the movie couldn't be more predictable. I knew exactly what she was going to do every time, from hair color, which I talked about, to which guy she was going to be involved with, to which side of this issue of racism she was going to be on. It would have been more exciting, frankly, if she had caved in like everybody else.
Okay, difference of opinion. Now
You
let's
bet.
take another look at the movies we reviewed on this program. We both voted thumbs down for Black Rain, the Michael Douglas thriller set in Japan. 2 more thumbs down for Heavy Petting, a lame compilation of old footage and nostalgia about adolescent dating practices. We both voted thumbs up, though, for In Country, with its inspired performance by Emily Lloyd as a young woman who wants to know more about how her father died in Vietnam. And 2 more thumbs up for A Dry White Season, with Donald Sutherland as a white South African who takes a moral stand. Finally, a big disagreement over Heart of Dixie, with Ali Sheedy as a Southern sorority girl who speaks out against racial injustice. A Dry White Season and In Country are the 2 we're agreeing on this week.
Yes, I'm amazed at how well, when I think of In Country, of how well the sequence is shot by that Vietnam War memorial. The creator of that memorial did a real spectacular job, and the film's equal to it.
It's a great memorial, and Norman Jewison does a very good job of bringing all the emotions together at the end of the film. That's it for this week. Next time we'll be back with reviews of more new movies, including Johnny Handsome, a thriller about revenge starring Mickey Rourke and Ellen Barkin, and also Welcome Home, a Vietnam drama with Chris Christopherson and Jo Beth Williams. That's next week, and until then, the balcony is closed.
Nestle Crunch. It's creamy milk chocolate and crispy crunchies. Chocolate is scrunchious when it crunches. That's why you'll love Nestle Crunch. Hot Pockets, the tasty hot meal without a big deal. Try hearty ham and cheese or zesty pizza. Hot Pockets, the great taste sensation. Johnny Cat is America's #1 premium cat litter. And now with our new drawstring litter box liners, Johnny Cat and a little privacy is all any cat needs. Backed by popular demand, your favorite old-time chewing gums, Beeman's Blackjack and Clove. A totally different taste experience. Beeman's Blackjack and Clove, available for a limited time only.